This is Alicia Jessup from Ruling Sports. Remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?
Providing insights to help you grow your business, improve yourself, and add value to those around you. You're listening to the Success is a Choice podcast, where you get a peek into the lives of industry leaders as they share their stories with you.
Welcome to Success is a Choice podcast. I'm your host, Jamy Bechler. And Tim Selgo is our guest today. Tim was the leader of one of the top athletic programs in the country for 20 years. As the director of athletics at Grand Valley State University, the athletic department claimed the Director's Cup as the top overall athletic program in NCAA Division II, an astounding 10 times. That's right, 10 times in his 20 years. Under Tim's leadership, Laker teams won 18 national championships. Tim was named the Division II Athletic Director of the Year 3 different times. He recently retired from Grand Valley State and is now a consultant with Athletics Staffing and Consultants, where he advises athletic departments on leadership training and staffing. Tim is also the author of the new book, Anchor Up: Competitive Greatness the Grand Valley Way. I look forward to getting the secret sauce on developing a championship culture from Tim today. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Great. Thanks for having me, Jamie. I appreciate it. I think everybody's looking for the secret sauce, but you know what? There's a lot of basic things that apply to every walk of life, and most of it is hard work. So I hope I can be of help to your listeners today.
Well, yeah, 18 national championships, 10 Director Cups championships. I think you knew a little bit what you were doing there, or your coaches knew, and at the very least, you knew how to hire coaches. So let's just jump in a little bit with, what you did at your time at Grand Valley State, kind of fill in some gaps. I gave a little bit of an intro there, but talk a little bit about your time at Grand Valley State.
Well, it was a absolutely phenomenal run for us at Grand Valley. Very rewarding 20 years of my life. I felt blessed to be the director of athletics at Grand Valley State University for 20 years. I spent 35 years total in college athletics. 15 of those years were at the University of Toledo, where I was fortunate enough to play college basketball for a tremendous coach by the name of Bob Nichols. And so I was blessed by being around great people my whole life. My own father was an outstanding teacher and coach at the high school level. My two older brothers played Division I athletics. So I took that time of my life to the University of Toledo, and again, very fortunate that the University of Toledo hired me and allowed me to work there for 15 years. My coach, Bob Nichols, hired me back as an assistant on his staff after I spent 1 year at the high school level teaching and coaching. And then I was fortunate that I was able to be the head women's basketball coach at Toledo for 3 years. And then following that, once again, my alma mater hired me again as the associate athletics director for 8 years. So for 8 years, I was really the number 2 person. I think today I would have had the title deputy athletics director. And our director of athletics, Al Bowl, really helped me develop a foundation in athletics administration during those 8 years. Our 2 head football coaches at that time were Nick Saban and Gary Pinkel. And so I learned a lot that helped me be prepared for when I got to Grand Valley. And when I came to Grand Valley was described to me by everybody. Well, they're a sleeping giant. It's a sleeping giant. I kept hearing that phrase, and I said, okay, well, let's go wake the doggone thing up then. And but Jamie, you hit the nail on the head. It starts with people. And I was fortunate. We had some great people at Grand Valley when I arrived. Brian Kelly was our head football coach at Grand Valley when I arrived. Now, he was only 34 years old, and he's not the coach that he is today at Notre Dame, but he was obviously very smart, very talented, and doing a great job when I arrived. And from there, it was clearly make sure I retained the good people there that were there, and as time went, fill in the positions with the kind of people that we wanted leading our student athletes at Grand Valley, that were competitive, that were driven, that worked hard, that cared about kids. And, that's what it comes down to. I told people over and over again over my career, you ask for a secret sauce. In college athletics, You have to surround yourself with a coaching staff and with a support administrative staff of people that work hard, that know their stuff, and they care about kids. And when you can keep it simple to those things right there, you're going to have success. And we happen to be at a great school, Grand Valley State University, and it allowed us to flourish and do the great things we did.
You talked about Brian Kelly, and you talked about people making the difference. You've had some great football coaches there. What was your kind of philosophy in terms of, some people could look at Grand Valley State as a stepping stone, even though you had a lot of success. What do you do as an athletic director, as a leader, when you have people? How do you balance that? You want to keep them, but you also love the idea that they get to move on to bigger and better things.
You're absolutely correct, Jamie, that I immediately sensed that Grand Valley could become a stepping stone. In fact, my first year at Grand Valley had just hired a new head men's basketball coach prior to my arrival, and we won the conference that year. We got a transfer from Iowa State by the name of Joe Moderman, who was our conference player of the year. He was originally from Allendale, Michigan, and he came back home for 1 year. Much today, we see a lot of one-year transfers coming for their final year. Back then, Joe did that for us, and our coach left for Central Michigan after 1 year. And it was at that time that I knew we could take advantage of doing some things contractually to make sure that this did not become a stepping stone. There's no question, I believe, the success not only in college athletics, but in any organization, in any walk of life, you must have stability. You must have people that stay with you. You must retain your good people. And at Grand Valley in college athletics, as you indicated, we're a really good Division II school. There are bigger and better jobs. I wouldn't say better jobs. There are higher paying jobs in Division I out there, of course. And we knew that. And the competitive spirit of coaches would always want them to move on. And we've had some great ones move on. But we decided we were going to put a buyout clause in the contract of every new head coach we signed. First of all, we were going to give them a multi-year contract. And we did that. Prior to my arrival, none of the coaches were really on multi-year contracts. They were on 1 year at will contracts, and that isn't the way to build a program. And in the words of Don Lubbers, our former president, and this whole story is in my book, Anchor Up. Don, as we were discussing it, and he coined it best. He said, we want to build programs. We don't want to have one-hit wonders. But by the same token, we don't want to chain these people to our institution if they want to go on and expand in their career. So we decided that 5 years was the fair time for both the coaches and the institution to build a program, in the sense that we put a buyout clause in all of our new head coaches' contracts, and that buyout clause was in there for a 5-year period. And if they left before that contract was up, they owed us that amount of money that was remaining on the contract. Conversely, quid pro quo, if we got rid of them before that 5 years was up, we owed them the remainder of that money. So our coaches had a buyout contract in their contract for 5 years. And for a Division II coach to leave early and pay off a contract, that's pretty hard to do. You're not going to go to Division II to make the money that we read about in the Power Five today. And so that worked extremely well for us. And then, quite honestly, Jamie, we hit a home run with a lot of great coaches at Grand Valley. And so we wanted them on multi-year contracts long after that 5 years was up. But they could leave at any time without penalty. Again, I think that told our coaches, we want you here. We want you to build a program. We're going to give you some security to do that. And then once you're past that 5 years, we still want you at Grand Valley. And we're still going to give you a multi-year contract. But if there's a bigger and better opportunity in your minds for you and your family out there, we're going to support you in that as well. And Brian Kelly, of course, eventually he was our head coach for 13 years at Grand Valley. and learned a lot about coaching during that time. He went on to Central Michigan and Cincinnati, now Notre Dame. We hired Chuck Martin following him. Chuck is now the head football coach at Miami of Ohio. Dave Deaney was our head women's soccer coach, won 3 national championships. He's now the head coach at the University of Iowa. And we have numerous other coaches. I think we have the best cross-country and track and field coach in the country at Grand Valley, and Jerry Baltus. And I say that regarding any level. I think he's the best coach in Division 1, 2, or 3. And if you look at the powerhouse a school like Grand Valley in the state of Michigan has become in cross country and track and field, it's had great leadership. And so a guy like Jerry Baltus, who's been at Grand Valley, I believe, 18 years now, we went beyond that buyout clause, and we've worked hard to retain Jerry as long as we can. And at some point in time there, probably about 10 years ago, and I give some credit to our university lawyer, Tom Butcher, because he was wholeheartedly in agreement with me that we needed to do something to try to retain these coaches after the buyout clause was gone. And we did develop some deferred compensation packages for our coaches. Now, it wasn't the kind you read about today, in the Power 5 level, of course, but we wanted to just let our coaches know we appreciated them. We wanted them to stay at Grand Valley. We were willing to live through some of the ups and downs you have in coaching. And I think one of the biggest problems in athletics leadership today, people are way too impatient with coaches. And we were going to live through some of those times and reward them for staying at Grand Valley. So again, we're not talking about big dollars here, but we're talking about contractually doing some things to retain our coaches, to let them know they're appreciated, and to build the successful programs that have allowed us to win all those Directors' Cups and national championships you mentioned.
Well, you obviously have had so much success there at Grand Valley, and you recently wrote a book, Anchor Up, and it kind of describes the blueprint or describes how that happened. Would you walk us through kind of when you decided you wanted to write this book, what went into writing the book, and then, it's related to sports, but can businesses, can people and corporations, can they get something out of this book as well?
In my opinion, there's no question they can gain something from it. I've always wanted to write a book. I'm an avid reader. I love to read. I love to write. And I felt we had a story to tell. With the success at Grand Valley and what we were able to take that sleeping giant. And honestly, we turned it into a giant in Division 2. And I feel very strongly about how we did it. Not just the fact that we did it, but I felt very strongly about how we did it. And I knew I couldn't share all my thoughts, all my ideas in a 30-minute podcast, and so I wanted to write a book about it. I wanted to tell the story in a book. So the impetus was that I felt we had a story to tell about the success in the building of the program at Grand Valley, and then how we sustain that success over time. And, I would honestly tell you, I think that's one of the things I'm most proud about. We not only obtained success, but we sustained it over time. And I think that's one of the best measurements of success there is. But along with that, I felt that over the years, I'd learned a lot about leadership and had some concepts about leadership that I wanted to share. And I, as an avid reader, I felt the best way to share your leadership or teaching methods would be through stories. And so we do that in my book, Anchor Up. And I'm very pleased with how it came out. So as anybody that's ever written a book knows, there's a lot of work involved in it. I'm already working on book number 2, Jamy, and it's a lot of hard work and finding time. It takes lots of time to write a book. That book, Anchor Up, it took 2.5 years to write it, and I could never have done it without the help of a man by the name of Gary Brown. I was about 3 years away from retiring at Grand Valley, and I was mentioning one day to a mentor of mine, we were sort of planning my second career, if you will, that I'm in now as a consultant and teacher and writer and speaker. And I said, I want to write a book. I think I have a story to tell. I want to write a book. I just don't have the time. When you're a director of athletics, time is at a premium. And he said, you need somebody to help you write it. And he instantly, the name Gary Brown popped into my mind. Gary has worked for a lot of years for the NCAA. He's a writer for the NCAA. And when I was involved in a lot of the Division II governance and chair of the Division II Management Council, Gary, we wrote things together. He would actually ghostwrite things for me, and he knew how I thought. And so the book Anchor Up has been a partnership with Gary Brown, and he's been terrific. He's going to help me with my next book. And so the one answer to your question is writing a book is a lot of work to get it done and do it right, but it's also a lot of fun. So I'm working on book number 2, and the simple answer to the question, why write a book, why be a consultant, why teach? I'm a teacher at Davenport University in the sport management program in their College of Business today, is that I want to use those 35 years of experience I've had in college athletics, and I want to help others. I want to help other people that are in leadership positions. And I think people well beyond athletics would enjoy my book, because I think many people like sports stories. I think they can relate sports stories to their careers, in whether it's in business and healthcare and education, whatever it might be, or government, nonprofits. I think the concepts that I talk about for leadership in Anchor Up will help anybody. And in fact, my next book, I'm going to use some sports stories, of course, because that's been my whole life. But I want to also tell some stories of leaders in business and nonprofits and in education, because I think people need to hear other success stories beyond sports, and I think it will resonate with an even wider audience. So I'm looking forward to that.
We'll return to the interview with Tim Selgo shortly, but I wanted to take a moment to mention something that goes hand in hand with what Tim has been passionate about his entire career, and that is making a difference in the lives of young people. You know, Frederick Douglass once said that it's easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. Well, we've put together a book that helps student athletes learn how to be better leaders and positive teammates. It's called the Leadership Playbook, Become Your Team's Most Valuable Leader. You see, when we help develop students, we can also help influence the future. So please visit theleadershipplaybook.com to learn more about this impactful book. And now back to more insights with Tim Selgo.
Well, one of the leadership steps that you mentioned in your book is surrounding yourself with the right people. And you already talked a little bit about what you did to keep people and some great ideas there of making people want to stay at Grand Valley. But what did you do to go about trying to find the right people? Because, you know, even if you have success, you don't just luck out as many times as you guys did with finding the right people. So almost everyone listening to this podcast has to hire or fire somebody at some point in their careers, but they have to find the right people to surround themselves with. How did you do that?
Great question, because in my opinion, that is job one for any leader. Who you hire and who you bring into your organization is ultimately going to determine the success of your organization. So job one for any leader is hiring the right people for your organization. And it's a lot of work. And everybody in the organization has to understand when there is a position open, that is job one. And I wanted everybody in my athletics department to know that when we were doing a search for a position, that took precedent and that was priority over anything else we did. Likewise, recruiting was the top priority for our athletic department. Recruiting the best and brightest student athletes we could find for our programs, that was a top priority. I think too often in college athletics, coaches will tend to want to improve their X's and O's, become better with strategy and tacticians and coaching. But in college athletics, as in any walk of life, you must have talent. To have high levels of success, you must have talented people. And in college athletics, that starts with recruiting the best and brightest student athletes you possibly can. So from my administrative assistant to everybody, they knew if we had a recruit on campus, and our coaches wanted to fit it into my schedule to meet with that recruit, that was a top priority. We changed my schedule so I could meet with that recruit and those parents. Likewise, we would have a recruiting retreat every year at Grand Valley. Every year, the first week of June, our coaches had to block off 2 days on their calendars, and we would meet for 2 days. How can we get better at recruiting student athletes to Grand Valley? Because it starts with people. And in college athletics, that's where it begins. In businesses, in healthcare institutions, in education, that's where it begins. No matter what the position is, it starts with hiring the best people. So when we would go recruit or search for a new head coach, assistant coach, administrative staff member, it was top priority. Everybody has to have that mindset to begin with. I will tell you, and I do go into depth in the book on our interview process, but I learned a lot when I was the associate athletics director at the University of Toledo. We had the good fortune to have 2 football searches and 1 head men's basketball search. And we talked with and met with a lot of great candidates. But no question, we vetted them thoroughly. And I learned a lot during that time. You never cut corners when it comes to the hiring process. Never cut corners. And I'm talking about both in time and in money. Now, I would tell you, I worked at a Division II institution. The vast majority of college athletics institutions, you're in a world of scarce resources. So I'm not talking about spending lots of money on these processes, but if you need to spend another couple $100 to go meet with a candidate a third time to make sure, you need to do it. And if that means taking an extra day or 2 in the search process, you need to do it. We're all under pressures, especially in college coaches where recruiting's going on and you got student athletes in your program and they're anxious to see who their next head coach is and they might leave if it's not the right head coach and so on. So there's no question, there's a sense of urgency. And being organized is a huge part of it, but also making it a priority. There are some things you have to leave on the table while you're going through a search process. So when we would be in a head coaching search, the beauty today, Jamy, is with technology, you can interview a lot of candidates via Skype or some other type of video conferencing that you couldn't do 20 years ago. You had to actually bring them onto campus. I never liked phone call interviews. I didn't. And I was so happy when video conferencing came about because with that first round of interviews, you could interview people and see them in person. And the one thing you did not get in a video conference interview is you don't get to see those candidates meet and greet people. And that's an important thing. That's an important thing in any walk of life. You want to see how people respond to them, how they respond to people. And you don't get that in video conferencing, but you do get almost everything else that you would in an in-person interview. And it can save you a lot of time and a lot of money. So we took advantage of that. And when it came time to the second round of interviews, then, of course, we would bring a candidate onto campus and tours and everything. And I wanted as many eyes and ears on each of these candidates that I could get, whether it was a search committee, whether it was the rest of our staff. I wanted as many eyes and ears, people to meet these candidates as possible. And I would tell our staff, and I would tell our search committees, understand this, you are a search committee. You are not a selection committee. And for the rest of our staff, I would say, I want your feedback on these candidates. I do not want you to rank them. I just want you to give me feedback. I can tell who you'll like just from your feedback. But I had to live with these selections. And I let everyone know I'm going to make the final decision. And I think leaders everywhere have to be willing to do that. They have to be willing to communicate that with their staff. They have to be willing to take the risk in doing that. And that's leadership. Too many leaders today want to make it a committee decision, want to get everybody's buy-in. There are no perfect candidates out there for any job. There aren't. The job of all these people with their eyes and ears on them, I wanted to know every strength and weakness of every candidate. And we hired every person we've ever hired, every person, a school that's ever hired me, there are weaknesses involved, but I wanted to know what they were so we could go to work on them. But we would have everybody in some way, shape, or form spend some time with candidates, and I would want their feedback. At the end of the day, it was Tim Selgo, the leader, that had to take all that feedback, digest it all, in combination with my, we'll call it a gut instinct. And that gut instinct comes about through experience, through learning, through working at it, through uncovering every stone, through vetting candidates thoroughly. Yeah, you'll develop a gut instinct if you're working at those things. At the end of the day, I would want to sleep on it before I made my decision. And I would ask myself, number one, is this person the right fit for our organization? That box needed to be checked. And everybody that works in any business or organization, you know what is the right fit. We can't always just define that perfectly, but you know who is the right fit for your organization. So I would ask that question, is this person a right fit for our organization? And then the second question I was always asked about coaching candidates is, would I want my son or daughter playing for this coach? That box needed to be checked for me. And that goes back to, if you're running a business, there's a like question for candidates for your positions. It may not be what I want my son or daughter to work to work for this person. Maybe that's it. I think you need to ask that question. But for me as the leader, that was important. Now that may not be as important for some athletics directors at the Power 5 level. I get that. But for me, that was important. And every leader needs to know that and go through that. So I could go on for an hour and a half on this whole process, as I've done with some of my clients. But it is, without question, Jamie, job one for any leader.
Well, people will just have, that's a teaser. People will just have to get your book.
Thank you.
Where can they find out more about you, connect with you, find out about your book?
Well, on social media, I am at Tim Selgo, simply at Tim Selgo. That's probably, I'm most active on social media, or Facebook or LinkedIn. So they can find me on social media at any of those outlets. Our book, my publisher is 5 Count Publishing, and their website is 5countpub.com. That's FIVE. COUNTPUB, all one word, 5countpub.com. And I think just Google Tim Selgo and anchor up, and they'll find my publisher's website. And that's the place people can go.
We'll put that in the show notes so people can check out that book. Definitely highly recommend it. You know, we're all trying to build a championship culture and all trying to make things better. And we all have to hire people, and we all have to get people around us. And you talk more, it's just not a hiring book. You talk more about more things too. So definitely go ahead and check out that book. What are you doing? You mentioned you like to read. What are some books that you recommend to our listeners, other than your own, of course?
Yeah, you know, and I like to read any book on leadership, and that might be a biography of a president or historical figure. I do like history. I love history. So I do read a lot of books that reflect on history. As I've gotten older, I've read fewer and fewer books about sports, but if there's a sports coach or leader that I particularly have respect for and want to learn more about, I'll certainly grab that. I have to tell you that I do read a lot of Louis L'Amour books. Louis L'Amour is the great historical novelist of Westerns. So when I need some light reading, I turn to Louis L'Amour. I've got every book he's ever read, and I love reading about the history of the Old West. So, but for me, from a leadership standpoint, I like biographies. I want to find the insight into other leaders and why they made decisions and what they're doing.
Well, you mentioned that you retired from your first career. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now, other than writing another book.
Sure. And by the way, back to our last question real quickly. I've read every book John Wooden has ever written. I grew up at an age when UCLA was winning all those men's basketball championships. And in my opinion, John Wooden is the greatest coach of any sport at any level in my lifetime. He was just a fabulous teacher. In any of John Wooden's books, I would recommend to any leader of any walk of life. And that's a set of books that I have every book Wooden's ever written, and read a couple of them twice. So that's another set of books that I like to read. I am currently doing consulting for a company called Athletic Staffing and Consultants. It's a company that has done a lot in college athletics, and most particularly in Division II, Division III, and NAIA, smaller non-Division I schools. And I have developed a leadership development plan for athletics directors and their senior leadership teams, whereby I'll come in and work with a school for a period of time, a couple of years, and we go through everything A to Z that's involved in leading an athletics department. Again, I want to use my 35 years of experience in college athletics and 20 years as director of athletics and help other people. I've got some great clients out there, and I've really enjoyed working with a lot of schools. One of them in particular, Texas A&M Commerce, and Tim McMurray, their athletics director, they're going to play for the Division II football national championship. So I've really enjoyed that aspect, Jamie, of working one-on-one with athletics directors and helping them in their departments get better. I also, in my consulting role, I'll do a lot of external reviews for schools in their athletics programs, where I go in and take a look and provide my insight into what they can do to make the changes they need to make to improve their athletics programs. And I've really enjoyed that as well. As I mentioned, at Grand Valley, we conducted a recruiting retreat every year. I've done those for some schools because that's, again, job one, surrounding yourself with great people, and colleges need to do that. So besides the consulting, I teach in the sport management program at Davenport University's College of Business. I'm teaching one class per semester. This semester, I'm teaching an athletics leadership class. Next semester, I'll be teaching a class in sport governance, and I really enjoyed that. It's allowed me to continue to be around college students, and I love that about my 35 years in college athletics, and this allows me to continue to do that, and I'm very thankful for Davenport University for allowing me to do that. And then along with my writing, as I mentioned, I'm working on book number 2. I also am getting a good deal of opportunities to speak to groups. I enjoy that, and so I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements as well.
Well, we'll be sure to put your contact information or where they can connect with you on social media, links to your publisher and the book, so that people can go out there and get that as makes for a great gift for somebody else that runs a business or is in athletics. And Tim, I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy, but you have a lot to add. I know we could talk for hours and hours about how to create a championship culture, which is why you wrote a book. Just like you said, you can't say it all in one podcast, so we appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Jamie. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on with you.
I highly encourage you to check out the show notes so that you can pick up a copy of Tim's book. Whether you are an educator or a business person, his insights and principles can be valuable in helping you build a championship culture. Thanks so much for listening today, and we'd love it if you'd be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. Ratings and reviews are the lifeblood of podcasts and can help others find the podcast. Thanks so much, and until next time, remember that success is a choice. What choice will you make today?